Chapter 31. By the beginning of October, Hermione and I, in our opinion, had become familiar enough with Lockhart as fans. One day, after a data lesson, we approached him with a stack of similar sheets of paper. We faked various letters and postcards for about a week, attaching Lockhart's photos to them with an eternal glue charm. "Professor Lockhart," Hermione said to him, blushing a little. "Yes?" Gilderoy took a break from his notes. "Ah, Miss Granger and Mr. Knight. My loyal fans and diligent students. How can I help? You see, Professor, Max and I have collected various postcards and stuff here so you can sign them. For our classmates and guys from our house. They are very shy to contact you directly. Here." Hermione blushed a little more, but not from embarrassment, but from such blatant lies that came from her. How I understand her. At her age, I couldn't lie at all. Although later, I learned so much that even I believed in those lies. A doubtful achievement, but useful in life. "Oh, of course. Of course, I will sign them." Lockhart smiled dazzlingly and accepted the stack of papers, with incredible speed, began to sign them in beautiful sweeping handwriting. When the first form for visiting the forbidden section was supposed to appear, I spoke. "It's incredible, Professor, how many things you managed to accomplish. You probably worked without sparing yourself." "Exactly." Lockhart looked at us with a wise glance and, despite not looking, signed the first form, putting it in a pile with already signed ones. "Only long and hard work can lead you along the path of mastery. Of course, it was much easier for me with my talent." Lockhart immediately smiled and began signing on. Hermione spoke on the next form. "Do you really want world peace?" "Oh yeah." Lockhart signed the form again without looking and put it aside. "That would be great, wouldn't it? Magical creatures, muggles, wizards, all live in peace. How many lives could be saved, how many nasty spells could be forgotten and consigned into oblivion?" For a moment, Lockhart broke into a dreamy smile, but quickly came to his senses and winked at us. "I hope you will put your energies into making this simple dream come true." Lockhart signed the remaining few fake cards with a smile and handed the stack back to us. It took him just a couple of minutes. "Thank you very much, Professor," we simultaneously thanked and, taking all signed cards, went to the exit. "Have a nice day. And you, do your best on the lessons." Already in the corridor, having turned the corner, we took a deep breath. It was close. "Yeah," Hermione agreed. "He is strange. Here, in the magic world, almost everybody is strange." On the same day, we went to the library and presented the forms to Madame Pants, the strict keeper of knowledge, books, tomes, and silence. She meticulously examined them, rubbed with her finger, waved her wand. She almost sniffed it, and only after these procedures led us to the forbidden section with disbelief. Despite its prohibition, during working hours, the large double doors that led there were wide open. You were allowed to visit the forbidden section at any time during business hours. Here, Madame Pants pointed to a thick simple book on a pedestal next to the entrance. "You can read the instructions for books that require a specific approach. In case of non-compliance, your right to visit the section will be cancelled indefinitely. Until renewal by the headmaster, personally. I hope I don't need to repeat the need for careful treatment of books. Especially here." Madame Pants gave us a stern look and left us alone with the books. The forbidden section was a quite spacious room with cupboards along the walls and 2 rows of similar cupboards in the middle. Many books were chained to them. Some were on special pedestals with rigid clamps, and some were entirely under glass showcases. All of them looked much grimmer than ordinary books in the library, which made these manuscripts and publications meaningful, to some extent, even frightening. "It's very exciting." Hermione was excited and happy at the same time, looking around with an enthusiastic gaze. "We need to properly study the instructions. Someone else, perhaps, would have rushed headlong to study previously inaccessible knowledge, but common sense said, study the instructions. It's not here for nothing." This is what we did for 2 days, causing the approving glances of Madame Pants, who periodically visited here to check. In theory, the forbidden section can be accessed by a student mainly from the 6th year for various projects, mostly on data. This is because here are the directions of magic that are mainly considered dark. On the other hand, there is information on higher potions, higher light magic, etc. It seems that all the most difficult, forbidden, dark things are simply collected here, everything in one place. I wonder if the director is such a fighter against darkness, then why didn't he throw it all away? I remembered the senior students due to the complete desolation of the forbidden section. Apparently, there are also some kind of enchantments that only Madame Pants's voice lets through from the sounds, but only if she wants to say something to those inside. And always the same volume and somewhat soft, not sudden. This is incredibly prudent, given the fact that in the forbidden section, you have to work with dangerous, rare, or fragile books. Or all of this together. Having studied and memorized the instructions verbatim, we proceeded to the books. We decided to read them according to a simple scheme. I am from the entrance to the left, Hermione to the right. We meet on the other side of the hall and go to the shelves in the middle. Yes, a month will not be enough, but then we plan to just go to Lockhart and simply ask him to sign the passes. Chapter 32. As soon as I started reading books to remember them, I was surprised at how well I do it. However, unlike Hermione, who can memorize books without even concentrating on the process, I had to put such a task in front of my brain. The books themselves were quite interesting, and not only because of their content. Some already contained magic, and sometimes it was not at all harmless. For example, if you touch an old black leather-bound book with thick leather pages with your hand, you will have an obsessive desire to sprinkle it with blood. The instructions say that the book must be taken with special gloves. There were only 3 pairs of these gloves for the forbidden section, and they could lie anywhere. A person who has not read the instructions can lose several years of life, a liter of blood, getting a curse, and updating the book a little. Unpleasant, right? There are other, more dangerous examples. One small, thin book with a brown, cracked cover can put a person into a coma. If you do not put a special enchant on her, then a ghostly green spirit will appear from her and yell at you like a banshee. There is a book that can chop off a finger and thank the old man that this wound is not dark magic and the finger can be grown. Among other things, during each of our visits to the library, I sometimes felt someone's presence. There was no one near. At least my eyes can't see them. But with some kind of sixth sense, I was sure aware that we were being watched. Not all the time, but every day. Not that it was annoying, no. I can even assume that it's Dumbledore who sometimes visits under the spell of invisibility because you can't ignore the second-year students in the forbidden section. You. Hermione's voice interrupted my thoughts, full of disgust. I left the book on the table and went to my friend. What? Hermione looked at me like she saw something incredibly vile nearby. There are such disgusting curses. She grimaced. And she looked pale. This is what I told her. These books, Hermione looked around the forbidden section, have overly colorful descriptions. But in many books, along with curses, counterspells are also given. This is important. In general, we are here mainly because of them. You cannot fight something about which you know nothing. Well, theoretically, you can. By force, insolence, and total exterminatus? I grinned back. An interesting word, exterminatus. But in general, yes. However, I do not consider this to be a sufficient, professional approach. There is no art in it. All brawn, no brain, I chuckled. This is not about us, right? Not about us, Hermione nodded and, with a sad sigh, went back to reading. So we continued to memorize day after day. I didn't even want to try many things, although there were just forbidden spells, rituals, and potion recipes here. For example, the same polyjuice potion, it wasn't dark or anything like that. It was simply complex, and the slightest mistakes in its manufacture could lead to consequences of varying degrees of sadness. Among other things, you need to use strictly defined body parts of the person you need to turn into. It must be representative of your species and gender. It is very important. The use of other particles, for example, a person of the opposite sex, can lead to a variety of ugly changes in the body. At least that's what it says. The most unpleasant thing is that without proper treatment, these changes may not completely disappear, leaving something behind on a permanent basis. Some changes are banally incompatible with life. Of course, it is not beneficial to anyone if everyone they meet can be a different person. For this reason, the manufacture of the potion is allowed only by craftsmen and under strict accountability. Just as buyers are recorded in special registers. Likewise, many potentially dangerous rituals are prohibited. However, this does not mean that they are all dark. The reasons are similar to Polyjuice Potion. Their uncontrolled conduct by unprepared and unprofessional wizards is fraught with sad consequences for them and those around them. Only rituals with sacrifices of intelligent beings are under a total ban. Hermione told me all this sometimes after going to the forbidden section. She studied the legislation of magical England and for herself sorted the acquired knowledge into categories of allowance. At the same time she told me. That's how we spent a month. Once a day, we did physical training, sat in the library, all in the same abandoned classroom practicing spells and enchantments, but nothing from the forbidden section. It is better to apply half, if not 3/5 of that knowledge after the psyche is formed and settled, the wizard matures. Ideally, do not apply at all. I am not a warrior of the forces of the light, no. But I bet that it is possible to find or create more stable and safe spells, enchantments, rituals, and potions than those listed in these books. Yes, they are easy. Yes, they are powerful. For spells, complicated moves and calculations are not needed. You do not need a thorough knowledge of huge formulas and the ability to count, like a calculator. A couple of passes, the right emotional attitude, a couple of simple calculations in my head, and a couple of phrases, that's it. Why don't I like it? Curses require negative emotions, anger, hatred, a desire to harm, maim, make the enemy suffer, kill. These emotions are easy to evoke. I bet the more often you use them specifically and deliberately, the more often they will pop up accidentally, spontaneously. Their safe use requires incredible self-control, and even more so, they should not be used at a young age when the core of the personality is just forming. Later, perhaps. These are my theories and guesses. This is not in the books, but I prefer not to use all of this for now. Yes, my personality is already formed, but I do not know if the still growing and forming body will affect it. Will a clemency help? The risk is not justified. Hermione agreed with my conclusions, so we study according to the school curriculum, although we share the knowledge gained in the forbidden section. Chapter 33. Time passed quickly and inevitably. Surprisingly, at Hogwarts, nothing interesting happens if you do not look for this interesting on purpose. Halloween has already arrived, October 31st. A holiday for everyone, grief for the hero. But nobody pays attention to it. I felt a little sorry for him because he was so fixated on the death of his parents. I can understand him. I buried my friends and remembered them for many, many years. Walking around the living room for breakfast, I just patted the boy on the shoulder. Be strong, mate. They say that death is not the end at all, but the beginning of a new journey. Harry looked at me with a kind of depressed look. Suddenly, Ron appeared out of nowhere. Come on, buddy, he pulled Harry along. It's a holiday. And be careful, or Knight and Granger will bite you. You will become a nerd, and I will lose a friend. I try not to take offense at Ron. He simply says what he thinks. He rarely says something out of spite or with a desire to offend. This is evident because sometimes he belatedly realizes that he offended, but pride does not allow apologizing. What about sincere and frank insults? They are aimed mainly at Slytherins. They all for him, by default, enemies, cunning scoundrels, and dark wizards. For breakfast in the Great Hall, there was pumpkin as the basis of everything. I am plagued by vague doubts that I will have to eat it on this day every fucking year. Anyway. Hi, Hermione sat down next to me and, with great appetite, began to gobble up the breakfast that appeared in front of her. Hello. Enjoy your meal. You too. Where have you been? Oh, yes, today I decided to figure it out early with jogging and exercise. We still need to go to Lockhart, don't you forget? Nope. Is it time to update? No, but soon. What are you going to update? Harry asked, sitting next to us. Oh, come on. What there at Lockhart can be updated? Ron pouted. He's a pompous peacock, worse than Malfoy. Also, the girls seem to be crazy. They look at him and sigh so much. I don't understand anything. Hermione couldn't help but smile at such a sincere statement, in fact, as I did. This is our little secret, Harry. I don't want to lie to you, so let me leave the question unanswered. Okay, he shrugged indifferently and went back to his meal. I focused on my thoughts, eating some pumpkin along the way. Halloween is the starting point for all the troubles of the year. The seventh Weasley does not stand out yet, she is full of health, but she scribbles something in the black diary with great enthusiasm. So the basilisk will still be. I haven't come up with a way to protect against it, except for the mirrors. From my dreams, of course, I know several options for killing him with rather powerful spells, but this is too, noticeably? Probably. A second-year student from an ordinary family shouldn't know this, by definition, just as there is no such thing in the forbidden section. Well, or we haven't found it yet. There are also many rituals with the sacrifice of a magical living creature to obtain some special abilities, but the consequences are unpredictable. What if I become like Voldemort, pale, noseless, and bald? I don't need this, my body and appearance are more than satisfied with me, and the pursuit of strength for the sake of even more strength, regardless of the consequences, will not lead to good. The second question is, what to do with Malfoy Sr.? There is no doubt that he will not leave me alone. However, it will not be easy for me to get him either. Plus, I haven't yet decided how Narcissa feels about him. It's not that important to me, but for some inexplicable reason, I don't want to grieve her with the death of her beloved husband, albeit a disgusting one. I'll kill him anyway, but first, I need to find out her attitude towards him. Judging by her hints in the store, she managed to tweak and twist something in herself. Either she restored the erased memories or something else. In any case, I have an idea how to stick Malfoy, but this can only be realized at the end of the year. For now, it is better to forget about it. Snape is not asleep, and my abilities in occlumency are unknown. Concerning occlumency, Flitwick denied us this request, but we came across a book on this topic in the forbidden section. I'm very glad that I don't have to slip the book to Hermione and lie about where I got it. After the book's appearance on occlumency in Hermione's life, it was with great difficulty that she was able to carve out 4 hours a week in her schedule to master it. Another day, Halloween, passed quite calmly. Study and training. Since I am not a very smart person, I again ordered the ingredients for a complex of potions to restore the musculoskeletal system from the twins. 6 months have already passed, and we can repeat the course. We will prepare the potion next week, as well as utilize it, but for now. The festive feast was quite cheerful and perky. Well, as always. A lot of pumpkin treats, instead of candles, pumpkins with carved scary faces floated above the tables. Some of the Muggleborns brought elements of the holiday into the general atmosphere, giving themselves a little otherworldly appearance. Everything was great. Such moments brought some kind of relaxation and emotional release to both me and Hermione. If it was psychologically easier for me due to my age, and physically, as I believe, due to hemomancy, and I could constantly study, practice, improve. Then, Hermione, despite her precocious adult disposition and a serious attitude to many things, remained a child, a little girl. Wait, why a little girl? She is 13 already. Oh, by the way. She talked a lot about herself and her parents, but never talked about her birthday. We need to fix it. Although I didn't say either. Oh, how difficult it all is. In general, she needed an emotional release, unlike me. The house did an excellent job with this. Yes, I'm not kidding. Gryffindor helps us in our studies because it is a noisy and awkward house. It is not necessary to participate in all these pranks and outrages. It is enough to observe them from the side so that it becomes somehow easier on the soul. It was only now that I realized that we wouldn't have taken root on Ravenclaw. No matter how we strive for knowledge and skills, it seems that our mindset does not suit these guys. Chapter 34. After the holiday feast was over and Dumbledore's short congratulatory speech ended, all the houses headed out to go about their business. There was still a little time before curfew, so everyone would have something to do, but not Destiny. We were one of the first to walk and one of the first to stumble upon a section of the corridor flooded with water, where Harry and Ron stood in shock. Opposite them, on the wall above the torch, flaunted a magnificent bloody inscription: "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." The torch support was adorned with Filch's petrified cat, suspended by its tail. "Ha! Tremble, enemies of the air," proudly declared Draco Malfoy, squeezing into the front ranks. "You're next, mudbloods." He looked incredibly proud and excited at the same time. No wonder Harry ended up thinking on Malfoy when he investigated this, no doubt convoluted case. Hearing about the mudblood, Hermione grimaced in the best traditions of Malfoy, but the girl's dislike was directed at him. "What's going on here?" A hoarse voice announced the appearance of Filch, our caretaker. He squeezed into the resulting void between the students and Harry with Ron. Then he noticed his cat. "What's with my cat?" "What?" he yelled, eyes bulging. Filch immediately looked at Harry. "It's you. You killed my cat." Filch stretched out his arms towards Harry like a zombie. "I'll kill you." "Calm down, Argus." Dumbledore joined our company, accompanied by several professors. Without losing his importance and dignity, he went to the cat hanging on the torch mount and carefully took it off. "Come with me, Argus." "You too, Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley." With an always beaming smile, Lockhart, in his light suit, approached the professors. "My office is the closest one, Headmaster, right up the stairs." "Come to me." "Thank you, Lockhart," the headmaster nodded. The crowd of students parted, like the sea in front of Moses, and the headmaster, together with the professors and the golden duet, left the scene. No further spectacles were foreseen, and everyone began to disperse about their business. And who needed to bewitch the poor cat? Hermione asked reproachfully on the way to our training class. "I don't know. Many do not like Mrs. Norris because she is too zealous in her duties." "Exactly. Performs duties. Helps her master." "Do you think she'll be okay? Do you like cats?" Hermione nodded. "I also. Most likely, everything will be all right. We need to investigate this incident. It goes beyond jokes and gags." "Mione, you think the professors can't do it?" "PFFF." The girl smiled, entering our class and ignoring my appeal. If you take the words of Harry and Ron for the truth, the professors missed Voldemort under their noses. And, importantly, they didn't see him point blank for a whole year. Or, even worse, they knew and did nothing. Where's your faith in teachers? Historical chronicles of different countries force us to think that people are not ideal, and their actions often carry ulterior motives. Social adaptation through books is not her best option. Oh well. Hermione grabbed her wand sharply. Stupefy, an almost blue elongated clod of spell flew at me, but it's hard to take me by surprise. At least, if what's happening is in my field of vision. Protego, the transparent film of the shield, turned out not good enough, having disintegrated from the spell. Once again, I regretted that wizards did not use such a primitive in my dreams. We grinned at each other. "It's time to warm up." We started our standard warm-up, throwing simple spells and putting shields in turns. After 10 minutes of this kind of badminton, we already began to move around the classroom. At first, we just walked, but after 5 minutes we started running. We threw off our robes, they interfere. The speed of casting spells increased, as well as their number, and now all the order went aside, and we turned into a kind of machine guns. One spell has not yet hit the shield or whistled at the temple, as the third was in progress. I launched a powerful Expelliarmus, and a blue beam whizzed by a centimeter from Hermione's head. She flushed all over, breathlessly, and with a strange expression, put her hand to her chest. "Do you feel the adrenaline rushing through your veins?" I asked with a smile. "This is a very strange feeling." It was evident that her legs and arms were shaking slightly from the excess of adrenaline. "Move even more. Adrenaline needs to be put somewhere." "No shields." "Ictus." A small jellyfish clot quickly rushed towards Hermione, but she nimbly stepped to the side to let the clot pass by. He crashed into the desk as if someone kicked it weakly. "Oh, you." With a smile, the girl was indignant, immediately directing her wand at me. The most important thing in this is that for a long time, it was not necessary to point a wand at the enemy with an outstretched hand. Both of us could have been hip shooting, not yet in all positions, but already in much more free poses. Ictus, a similar clot escaped from her wand, and Hermione immediately shifted the wand to the desk. "Damn them." A sharp movement of the wand and the desk flies at me. "Sassy girl." I think I smiled too. The attack was two-sided and did not give much room for maneuver. I had to bend like Neo, but to the side, letting Ictus under me and my desk above me. I immediately responded with a pair of throwing and paralyzing ones, falling and leaving behind desks in the roll. So we had fun until we fell exhausted. Hermione was starting to really fucking love dodging spells, and the smoother she did, the happier she was. She was completely delighted with those cases when she managed to combine several attacks and dodges in one complex movement. But no matter how delighted our simple fights were, she still liked to make miracles, enchant objects, transfigure a variety of things much more. I could not help but note that she is more talented than me in magic. Slightly, albeit not much, but better perceives all this magical. "Let's try to combine your love of creation with the attack." We sat on the floor, leaning against the classroom wall. "How?" It amused me how pleased she looked. Standing up and stepping aside, I waved my wand and quickly cast a series of spells. Aguamenti levis, forma, glassifers, damnum. A large stream of water that emerged from the wand hung in the air and grew in size. The second spell gave it the shape of a sharp icicle, the third turned it into ice, and the fourth sent it flying at great speed. The icicle pierced the desk and shattered, leaving a decent-sized hole in its wake. It took me 3 seconds. Long, but interesting. Hermione thoughtfully looked at the result of my actions. "I think that after a long working out of such a combination, it will be possible to reduce the time to 1.5 seconds. Hermione nodded to herself. "And working out the verbal formula." "Yes, good diction is needed," Hermione continued to argue. "I agree. And further training will help you get to nonverbal witchcraft. Or, perhaps, there is simply a spell of such an icicle. Just one spell. By the way, can you do something nonverbal? Leviosa once in a while." "It's hard. Words are very helpful in concentrating. Without them, it is difficult to cast a spell. They are like a reflex." "So you think the same?" "Yes." "Have you ever tried it without a wand?" "Yes, but these are not spells. More like loosely controlled bursts of magic." "Can you show it?" Hermione removed the wand she still held in her hands, held out her palm. She concentrated so hard that a small crease appeared between her eyebrows. For a couple of seconds, nothing happened, and then an amorphous blinking ball of lumos lit up in her palm. "Not for long. It's hard. As I understand it, this is not an enchantment or a spell at all. Bear will produces a familiar effect. You will need to practice it later." "I have an idea. Learn to feel exactly how the spell is being cast, feel it to the smallest detail, and recreate these sensations without a wand. Have you decided to become stronger than Dumbledore?" Hermione grinned but quickly returned to a pensive state. I walked over to her and sat on the floor next to her, leaning against the wall. "What are you thinking about?" Oh, about Filch's cat. What exactly? Hermione looked at me and sat back, turning slightly in my direction. Look. While I was dealing with laws, precedents, and historical summaries last year, I came across an interesting fact. About 50 years ago, a certain heir opened the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts. Then the Muggle-born girl died. In unofficial sources and the Yellow Press, heir also appears under a different name. Heir to Slytherin. Do you think this is one of the Slytherins? It's a difficult question. One would think on Malfoy, but did you notice how he reacted? He was pleased. And surprised. Yes. He did not expect to see something like that, but he has nothing against it, and, moreover, he supports it. And he knows that this heir doesn't like Muggle-borns. It would be logical that the heir was in Slytherin, but this is too obvious and simple. They are not stupid there, Mione. Well, not all. On Slytherin, there are many offspring of more or less influential and wealthy families or striving for it. I mean that it's so stupid to substitute, write about the heir, bewitch the cat. Petty and more like an act of distraction. I also thought so, although I really want to act simply. Blame the Slytherins. As I said, a distraction. You can also think of the twins, but this is not their handwriting. They leave an indication of themselves. Like some killers from books. I nodded. I bet the heir, or at least the one who bewitched the cat, has nothing to do with Slytherin. I mean, to the house. I understood. We were silent for a couple of minutes. Hermione sighed, lifting herself off the floor. Another story where the butler turns out to be the killer. I could not resist and laugh. You think it's Filch? No. This is too much even for Hogwarts. Hermione laughed, and we went to the living room. Perhaps I should take a shower. Chapter 35. For several days, Hogwarts was literally bursting with talk and various kinds of rumors about the incident with Filch's cat. This was facilitated by both Filch, who constantly kept watch at the inscription, in vain trying to erase it, and some Slytherins. Poor Filch seemed to be hoping that the intruder would return to the scene of the crime, and the Slytherins seemed to feel the invisible support of someone powerful behind their backs. They provoked the guys from our house into fights, both magical and more traditional, Muggle. One such group was the Malfoy Company. He often appeared surrounded by Crabbe, Goyle, Nott, Zabini, and, oddly enough, the younger Greengrass. The girl sympathized with Malfoy, although she hid it well. Parkinson tried to keep up with her, but did not seem to want to march in the crowd. These few days, Hermione diligently spent the remaining time in the forbidden section. Still, she did not forget about the usual library, diligently looking for various facts. I watched people around. Ron constantly reassured Ginny, who was not herself, because of this incident. She has the diary, that's for sure. Ron believes that the girl is extremely upset that the cat is petrified, and she does not like what is happening. I have a different guess. Ginny knows perfectly well who did it, and most importantly, how. I honestly feel sorry for her, but, on the one hand, this is her mistake. On the other hand, if this whole performance is being held under the headmaster's strict guidance, then it is incredibly unreasonable to interfere in it. Under such thoughts, I was sitting on one of the windowsills in an empty corridor. Not far away, somewhere around the corner, there were the sounds of footsteps, the sound of books falling, and chuckles. "Look where you're going, mudblood." Draco Malfoy's hostile tone could be recognized a mile away. I jumped briskly from the windowsill and turned the corner, an amazing picture. Hermione and Draco looked at each other with hostile eyes. Nearby are Crabbe and Goyle, the black Zabini, and the younger Greengrass. It was clear from the last two faces that they didn't understand anything, but out of solidarity, they would support. "Looking for trouble out of boredom, Malfoy?" I asked calmly as I walked up to Hermione. "Look who came," he sarcastically drawled. "Mudblood rushes to help Mudblood." Draco grinned and glanced at his comrades. The boys supported him with cheerful smiles, but Astoria looked at me somewhat surprised. I wonder if Draco really doesn't see my resemblance to my mother, or is he faking it? I ignored them completely as I picked up Hermione's book. The wand is already resting in the sleeve and is ready to be in hand in a split second. I returned the book to the girl. Come on, don't linger here. You can catch some kind of disease from the dampness of the dungeons. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Draco Boyle. He drew his wand and pointed it at me, but I can clearly see that there is no movement for the spells. No movement is not the level yet. But just in case, I'm ready to dodge, and Hermione is already holding the wand in a convenient position for her at belly level, standing half-turned to the opponents. I will need to give her an idea for a less threatening position, relaxed, misleading the enemy. And what will you do? I went almost close, and the tip of Malfoy's wand looked into my forehead upwards. I'm surprised you know which side to take the wand. Crabbe and Goyle made a scary face, more befitting of a pooping monkey. No, I'm serious. They need to take a master class from someone older. This is ridiculous. You. Malfoy clearly does not possess sufficient self-control. Sluggle. I touched his hand with a sharp movement, pressed on the metacarpal bone with my fingers, twisting the hand, and immediately intercepting the dropped stick. Malfoy cried out from the sharp pain and, pulling his hand, jumped back, with some resentment looking from his hand to his wand, which I deftly twirled between my fingers of the left hand. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I jumped to conclusions. You still don't know how to hold it. All this I said without any emotion on my face, which further infuriated Draco. Although you can enrage him with anything. Crabbe and Goyle moved towards me, deciding to wrinkle my, no doubt, beautiful face. Impedimenta spatsis, using Malfoy's wand, which turned out to be surprisingly obedient, I slowed down the guys so that for a moment, I felt like Quicksilver from Marvel, they moved so slowly. Well, sadly, the speed of perception of the world in such a state does not decrease. You can take it back when you wake up. Noticing Astoria's offended face out of the corner of my eye, I couldn't help but smile. Well, children, eh? Sorry, young miss, the circumstances, I threw Malfoy's wand aside. They still have to swim like that for about 10 minutes if someone does not disenchant or they themselves do not get rid of the spell. The latter is unlikely. I would have done it myself, Hermione rebuked me when we moved a little to the side. I have no doubt, but my method is less painful. Let's go to our class. Quickly reaching the training class next to the living room, Hermione cleared the dust from the first desk she came across and sat on it. I have unpleasant news. Is the inspector coming to us? I'm glad that you read Russian classics, but our affairs can really turn out to be incredibly bad. I'm listening to. Hermione opened the book and quickly found the page she was looking for. It featured a basilisk. And a bunch of text about him. Having compared the facts, opinions, arguments, and my own thoughts, I came to the conclusion that a giant basilisk is crawling around the castle. I wondered how the girl could find such information so quickly. Even a week had not passed. Go on. So, Hermione pulled up a chair and sat down. If we take for the truth that the current heir and the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago is the heir of Slytherin, then this can be based on. The symbol of the house is a snake. This symbol was introduced by the founder himself, Salazar Slytherin. The history of Hogwarts states that he could speak to snakes in their language, Parseltongue. Assuming that he, as it is said in the books, was proud and vain, and in the books, there is no mention of any Slytherin's horror. What horror? The horror of Slytherin. This was the name of something that was hidden in the Chamber of Secrets and was released last time. So that's it. Okay, next. Mrs. Norris was petrified. I know, and in general, I told you that. Overheard in the living room. This is not so important. So I thought, how can I please my pride and vanity if I were Slytherin? Why not breed the world's most dangerous snake? Great option. And hide it from the rest, otherwise, they will kill it, and you can amuse your pride even during a conversation with this snake. The only thing that falls out of theory a little is petrification. Partial. Mrs. Norris is alive but still petrified. How does the basilisk bewitch the victims? Direct eye-to-eye gaze. And there was a puddle on the floor. Exactly. Hermione slapped her hand on the desk. She could see the basilisk in the reflection. Although there is no evidence of this, it may well be that an indirect look into the eyes of a basilisk does not kill, but forces you to fall into such a state. This is problematic. This is a huge problem. What should we do? Basilisks have one weakness, the crowing of a rooster, but let me remind you, Max, someone killed Hagrid's roosters. All of them. Hagrid complained about this. Yes, our sitting in the living room and listening habit really helps us to learn an incredible amount of information without putting in any effort. Ours don't care about confidentiality at all. Hermione, I spoke seriously, we don't go one by one anymore, generally. Better not to walk at all. Not walking at all is not an option. But in a group, pretty reasonable. Perhaps, the heir will not dare to attack several targets at once. Someone can leave and report on the situation. We stick to crowded places. And, just in case, we need mirrors. I have a couple. I have a lot of things. Great. We also need to report our guesses to the professors. Then Flitwick or Sprout. Why not Professor McGonagall? Hermione was surprised. I don't trust the headmaster, even if he is a great light wizard, but he did not cease to be a man with his own personal interests because of this. McGonagall is his loyal deputy. Oh, and I somehow did not notice the concern about my house on the part of our dean. This is very sad, by the way. When I watch and listen to how Professor Flitwick and Sprout care about their own students, even I become jealous. Let's go to the living room. I'll give you a mirror. Chapter 36. The day before the first Quidditch match between the Gryffindor and Slytherin teams, Hermione and I approached Professor Lockhart. Of course, right after the Dada class. Professor. Ah. My loyal fans. Can I help you? Yes, Hermione nodded. We really need your help, nothing difficult. Lockhart smiled radiantly and waited for the continuation. You see, I would like to study the properties of some poisons. After reading Walking with the Ghouls, I was incredibly impressed with how cleverly you drained the poison out with a tea strainer. And so, I became very interested in slow acting and other poisons. Ah, Walk with the Ghouls, yes, I remember, Lockhart smiled. Did you like it? Yes, I liked it very much. I was also impressed, I said with reverence in my voice. The thing is, continued Hermione, that books on such poisons are in the forbidden section, and there are really a lot of them. You don't have to continue. I understand you perfectly. I think this desire for knowledge should be encouraged among young minds. Do you already have forms? Of course. Hermione nodded happily and held out 2 forms, one for herself and one for me. Lockhart took them and, taking a large peacock feather from the table, wrote an intricate signature on the forms. It is my duty to help the best students and fans. Lockhart handed us the signed papers, and we, thanking the professor, quickly rushed to the library. We need to certify the forms. Another month of enhanced memorization awaits us. As before, Madame Pants carefully checked the forms and took us to the forbidden section. The librarian did not read the instructions, because she was quite pleased with us, not a single mistake in working with books. I was not afraid of a basilisk attack on us, and there is one theory, albeit not confirmed, but a theory. If I remember the tale of Harry Potter correctly, then the basilisk victims were those who annoyed our hero in one way or another. I don't believe Ginny's words that she doesn't remember what she did under the diary's influence. But, even if this is the case and the girl was completely under the influence of the diary and really did not remember anything, then Riddle used the information from the 7th Weasley to frame Potter. Those events really looked like that. I'm not afraid of a basilisk attack on us since I don't have any contact with the guy, and Hermione doesn't hang around him, causing outbursts of jealousy of the redhead. Of course, I don't think we're completely safe. There is a possibility that the theory is wrong, or we may just encounter the basilisk by accident. For this reason, we decided to move mainly with someone else. The next day, at the end of the first week of November, a Quidditch match took place. Hermione and I decided not to leave the Gryffindor's living room at all. This time can be spent on homework or organizing what has already been memorized from the forbidden section. We decided not to go anywhere for a simple reason: almost all the students are on the Quidditch field. There is simply no one to move around the castle with. So we sat and studied. But, when we decided to understand a couple of curses theories from the forbidden section, we were faced with a factor of insufficient basic knowledge. Not that everything was completely incomprehensible, but an important rule of magic has long been learned: in order to safely use magic, you need to understand it perfectly. The more complex the spell, the more unintended consequences can arise from mistakes or lack of understanding of the process. But we did not despair. We need the knowledge of the forbidden section for the future. Anyway, we will not forget it, but we can figure out the details later when we tighten the base. The silence of the living room was interrupted by a crowd of students bursting in. They cheered, congratulated each other, and especially the Quidditch team. Only Potter wasn't among them. The fun flowed like a river, but no one even paid attention to us. Everyone had long been accustomed to putting on everything, so they did not climb. Not even Ron expressed his opinion about our lack of Gryffindor spirit and other things. And we sat and watched, periodically making notes for notes and discussing various spells. Closer to lights out, when everyone had already calmed down, the little ones began to disperse to the rooms, and the older guys pulled out butterbeer, the Weasley twins' contraband. Small Colin Creevey snatched a decent-sized branch of grapes and washed out of the living room. "Younger Weasley hasn't come back yet," I whispered, leaning closer to Hermione. "I noticed. There is no Potter yet, 2 from the 4th, 3 from the 6th, and 2 from the 7th years. Miona, do you think this is one of them?" Mrs. Norris was disliked by almost everyone, so it's hard to say. I didn't think I would say this, but we need to wait for the development of events and only then build hypotheses. "Hey, kids," the twins came up to us. "Why are you not in bed?" "We're studying," we answered at the same time, looking at the twins that were standing on either side of the sofa. "I can't help but notice." One began. "That you are strange," continued for him the second. "And completely inexplicable. The Gryffindor phenomenon." "And why is that?" Hermione grinned, returning to the notes on the parchment. "There is just a little left to do. You are the only and the first in the history of the house who has not lost a single point in a year. But this is good?" I looked them in the eye. "Certainly," they said synchronously, getting into some kind of self-righteous posture. "But you are too boring," said the left one, and both turned sour at the same time. "In any case," continued the second one, "we have to hurry you and send you to the bedrooms. If for no apparent reason McGonagall appears, then you will be punished, as we do, for the fact that we are here having fun with you. We spoil the youth. We decompose growing geniuses. And other nonsense. But nonsense punishable. Your manner of speaking is giving me a headache," Hermione reproached them and put the final point in the essay. The twins chuckled and headed towards the rest of the company. "Come on, finish there and go to your rooms." I didn't think they would show such concern. They are worried about themselves, Herm. About themselves. You see only bad things in people. I don't deny it. I don't like people. Hermione smiled at my words. You said it in such a tone, as if people are not tasty breakfast, but you have to eat. Where did you get such thoughts in your head? You didn't get sick? Hermione sighed wearily and rubbed her face with her palms. Is this all the forbidden section? Some nonsense comes to mind? Not really, she shook her head. I have already got used to sending disturbing knowledge to the far corners of memory. It just takes more time. As you know, but be careful, we are still children. If you have unpleasant dreams, then we will go to Madame Pomfrey for the potion Dreamless Sleep. No, no, no. No need to see Madame Pomfrey, Hermione feigned horror. Herm, I'm serious. Mental health is our everything. We have already found out that a clear and quick mind is the key to successful witchcraft. Hermione pouted but nodded. Okay. If I have such dreams, or even if I don't get enough sleep, then I'll go right away. We will go together. Do not forget that a snake can crawl around the castle, killing with a glance. Okay. Good night, Max. And you. We went to our rooms, and the next morning the whole Hogwarts learned that our little paparazzi, Colin Creevey, had fallen into a daze. Alive, scared, petrified. So far, everything is in relative order. Sounds cruel, but nonetheless. It's okay, because the children are alive. In the evening, glancing in the mirror and making sure that I had not grown a beard with bells, I went to bed with a clear conscience. Chapter 37. The next day, the ingredients came from the Weasleys. Yes, I ordered them, like last year, through the twins. Why not? Mediation costs a pittance, or rather a couple of shekels. On the same day, we brewed a complex of potions to restore the musculoskeletal system. We applied them according to the worked-out scheme with the help of Confundus. Another portion of strong pain and nasty taste in the mouth from the potions, and we can again train as much as we wish. But only in the morning. Hermione and I forced our prefect, Percy Weasley, to accompany us to our classroom for self-study. The argument was simple: we are the best students of the house and the year, we bring many points. It will be bad if we are bewitched, and the school cup will not be seen. Percy was inspired, and now with his classmate escorts us to our secret room and then takes us back. It's not far to walk here, but you don't want to risk it. I don't think the guys will be able to help us in any way in the event of a basilisk attack, no. I just hope that the basilisk won't attack such a company, no matter whether it is controlled by the seventh Weasley or Riddle. But such an attack will destroy the legend the Weasley is pure blood, like his comrade, whose name I don't know. We had to slightly adjust the schedule. Now, immediately after the end of the last lesson, Hermione and I sat in our office without leaving and practicing spells, doing homework, and so on. Physical preparation took place early in the morning. Percy helped to sort out the food. He introduced me to Timmy, the house elf, who happily brought us all sorts of goodies into the office. Also, this little house elf shared gossip while amusing herself with her manner of constructing phrases, talking about herself in the third person, and in the most amusing manner portraying the characters from these rumors. With the help of the house elf, it was found that all house elves, without exception, are aware that the terrible horror is periodically moving around the castle, that's what they call it. She also said that with the appearance of the terrible horror, spiders began to run away from the castle. This was very good news for the house elf, but the joy was overshadowed by the reason for this migration. It all fits. Hermione nodded. Timmy brought us dinner, told the spider's story, and hurried off to do other important things, disappearing with a pop. What exactly? We sat at the same desk and looked with a certain doubt at a huge amount of different foods. Like last year, potions have increased our appetite, and the little house elves were happy to feed us. It seems to me that these little creatures cherish hope. The hope that we will burst from overeating, and they will snatch their piece of strong young wizards. What do you think? I'm just interested in your conclusions, I smiled at the girl. But I can share mine. In the wizarding world, it so happened that spiders are afraid of snakes. They are either trying to kill them, or they are running. In our case, the latter. They run because they sense a very strong snake. Now there is no longer any doubt that this is a basilisk. Exactly. And petrification instead of death, I suppose, is due to indirect gaze. Colin was petrified, holding the camera in his hands. According to Harry, he was looking through the viewfinder. But, this is strange. Hermione poked thoughtfully with a fork at the pieces of potatoes, indifferently bringing them to her mouth, chewing quickly. What exactly? Moaning Myrtle. Oh, you mean the ghost of that girl? Yes. It was she who died 50 years ago. In the toilet. Did you notice that she wears glasses? I haven't even seen her. It doesn't matter, she wears glasses. And she died. We will need to ask her. Let's not today? Of course. It's too late. And about the camera. You know, Colin has a camera with a mirror viewfinder, not a telescopic one. Here, too, the theory is quite pertinent. After this conversation, we just had dinner. After finishing her meal, Hermione called Timmy and asked her to clear the dishes. The house elf snapped her fingers and disappeared along with the dishes. I just thought. Most of the relatively harmless offensive spells and curses begin with a downward movement of the wand. I also noticed that sorcerers don't really react to the wand unless it's pointed at them. Let us suppose. What is the easiest way for you to conjure? Where to keep the wand? Ideally, I need to see the direction of the wand and the target on the same line. Hermione took out her wand and held out her hand, pointing at the wall. And if closer to the face? Hermione glanced at me inquiringly but just nodded and flexed her elbow, bringing the wrist closer to her face. At the same time, she made different movements for trial. You know, the wrist moves even better. And the movements are somewhat more accurate. You can reduce their amplitude, speed up the casting of the spell. Great. Now turn the other side to the intended goal. No. Right shoulder back, left shoulder forward. Yes, just like that. I nodded contentedly. It's just that when I thought about how Hermione conjures, how she loves to dodge and merge everything into smooth bundles of movements, translating one into another. I remembered one of the most charismatic villains of cinema from my past world, Bellatrix Lestrange. Her manner to relaxed behave, holding her wand to her face and instantly launching an attack from this position. Plus, in this position, the arms are closer to the body, which allows you to move faster, dodge, and turn the body. And what I saw in others, arms outstretched to the side, tense postures, all this reduces mobility. And it can turn out to be silly, but a prank. Look. Try to move in a relaxed way, as you would on a walk, and hold the wand somehow. I got up and parroted Bella as I walked around the office. Hermione's hysterical laughter made it clear that it was SOSO. Or, on the contrary, it is too good. Ha ha ha. Okay, stop. Ha ha. I also smiled and, as if embarrassed, scratched the back of my blonde head with my 5 fingers, looking at Hermione bursting into laughter. After a couple of minutes, she calmed down from what she saw and, wiping away a non-existent tear, decided to try. For almost an hour, she moved around the cabinet, tapping her chin with her wand, then on her cheekbone. First, she portrayed thoughtfulness, then joy, then sadness. Sometimes, she suddenly broke into some ornate curtsy, very dangerously waving her wand, like a musketeer a hat. During such tomfoolery, she did not forget to abruptly begin to conjure with a wand at the very face, instantly sending some kind of spell into the wall. It looked pretty effective. Wizards rarely expect an attack from a relaxed opponent. Well, except in cases when nothing but an attack can happen. And also, if the enemy expects an attack and prepares to defend himself, then such behavior will unnerve him and, possibly, provoke an attack. And here, the advantage may be on your side. And what about your style? Asked Hermione, and literally a second later, she laughed again, probably remembering my walk. No, not as you thought. I'm more comfortable from the body. I got up, took my wand in my hand, and, like a strict teacher, began to tap it on the palm of my other hand, raising it to the level of my stomach. It's easier for me to aim offhand. Even easier than keeping a wand in line of sight. I pointed my wand at Hermione with a whip and immediately began to move it downward, sending stupefy at her. Hermione abruptly but smoothly stepped back, letting the blue blob past her head, and immediately answered in the same way, almost at her very face, pointing her wand at me. In a couple of seconds, a short duel with the transfer of spells was organized. Well, what do you think? I asked the thoughtful girl when we stopped throwing chaos around the classroom. Not quite what you need. You need to work it out, find something of your own. But what you suggested is already close. Well. Look, I'll show you one more trick. I conjured Protego Totalis. A transparent sphere appeared around me. For now, I need to concentrate quite hard on it while using a wand. I channel magic through her. The sudden movement will easily cancel concentration. I put my left hand's fingers in the pistol and ran them over the wand. The power of the spell shifted from the wand to the fingers, but the shield floated and weakened a little. Wow, admired Hermione when I freely moved the wand, twisted between my fingers, while the spell remained in place. Yeah, I smiled back. You just need to train a lot. The wand helps to channel magic, and without it, it hardly stretches out of the body. Yes, and it dissipates strongly. I clearly feel it. Immediately, I waved my wand and created a simple lumos. The problem with Protego Totalis is that it creates a two-sided shield from under which you cannot attack. But this is nothing more than a trick without training, Hermione said and tried to repeat it. The shield disintegrated almost immediately. Preschool training and exercises with hemomancy clearly helped me. I agree. You can devote some time to this, but not much. It's already barely enough. Chapter 38. We trained every day. Hermione was looking for her own witchcraft style, and her, not pronounced adventurism, which was hidden behind the face of a strict and correct girl, could not but affect this style. It looked pretty mundane and commonplace. Hermione could communicate, smile, grimace a little while either tapping herself on the shoulder with a wand or as if thoughtfully, bringing it to her mouth or just holding it at belly level like me. It looked so natural that you stopped paying attention to the wand. A short moment, and you are already flying into the wall and do not understand, how, where, why. Yes, a couple of times she caught me inattentive, and even my superhuman, I dare to hope, speed did not help me in any way. Time passed, days flew by, the sudden first snow had already fallen, one had only to go to bed. Just yesterday, the land around was gloomy and dull, the smooth surface of the Black Lake justified its name, turning into a gloomy reservoir. But then you woke up the next day, and everything around is covered with snow, as if after a snowfall. McGonagall collected applications from students wishing to stay at the castle for Christmas. There were more people willing to leave than last year, and our dean collected only a few applications from the entire house. Mine and Hermione were among them. Sometimes I was bursting with curiosity, how was the Golden Duo doing in the absence of Hermione in their company, but after thinking it wisely, I decided that I didn't want to know anything and go to them too. The guys are running, fussing, asking someone, looking for something, quarreling with Malfoy, for which special thanks to them. After that incident, Draco didn't climb up to me, but looked angrily and resentfully. Well, he doesn't bother us, the better for him. After another week, as always, after the morning practice and shower, Hermione and I went down to the Great Hall for breakfast and found an entertaining announcement, around which the students crowded. Dueling Club. Oh, even the nerds are interested, said Ron, amid the chuckles of the others. This is a dueling club, Max. What are you going to do there? Throwing books at each other? Neither I nor Hermione reacted to this pass, and Harry pulled his friend aside. The guys around were discussing the idea of the club, making assumptions and guesses. Do you want to prove yourself? I asked Hermione over breakfast. I do not know. We'll see. But I can see what she wants in her eyes. Of course, the best student is great, but it would also be nice to show the skill. At 8 o'clock in the evening, we went to the Great Hall, accompanied by Percy. Our permanent guide was so imbued with our safety that he extremely insistently asked us to notify him if it was necessary to change location. Well, yes, we really bring a lot of points. The Great Hall looked very different and subtly the same. The illusion on the ceiling now showed only impenetrable darkness. Enchanted candles were burning under the ceiling. The dining tables were gone, and instead, there was a large dueling podium, and along the walls, there were platforms on which students could sit. And there was someone to be accommodated. It seemed that almost all of Hogwarts had gathered in the hall. The faces are tense and agitated in the hands of the magic wands. Everyone whispered with enthusiasm. We made our way through the crowd closer to the duel podium. How do you think? Hermione asked, reaching out slightly in my direction. Who will teach the classes? I sincerely hope that Professor Flitwick. He's a 5-time dueling champion. The probability is extremely small. Why? If he could, he would have taught students a long time ago. But he is the head of Ravenclaw and the choir curator. Is there a choir at Hogwarts? Hermione couldn't hold back her surprise. I'm shocked myself. But it would be GR. Ah, shit. Forget it. Hermione shook her head in the direction of the stairs to the podium, along which the unforgettable Lockhart climbed. As always, he looked obscenely good, although, in this beige jacket with rich embroidery, he clearly had a small belly. Hee hee. Come closer. Can everyone see me? Can everyone hear me? Perfectly, said Lockhart, flashing a smile. Professor Dumbledore approved my proposal to create a dueling club at the school. By attending the club, you will learn to defend yourself if circumstances suddenly require. And my life experience tells me that such circumstances are not uncommon. Read about it in my books. I will be assisted by Professor Snape. With these words, Snape walked to the other side of the podium in a little bit unusual clothes. Although, in fact, he simply wasn't wearing a robe, so it seemed a kind of coat made of thin fabric was somewhat unusual. Or is it a very elongated semblance of a jacket? I don't know. He's a little good at dueling, Lockhart continued, ignoring the barely disguised hostility of both Snape and the Slytherins. I suppose they had a much better idea of the potions master's capabilities. Now, we will show you how duelists fight with magic wands. Oh, don't worry, my young friends, I will return the potions professor to you safe and sound. It would be great if they killed each other. Ron spoke up rather loudly. Loud enough for almost everyone to hear, despite the quiet noise of student conversations. The duelists parted to the sides, although not far, they already stood almost at the right distance. They turned to each other. Snape made a minimal bow, saluting his wand against his face. On the other hand, Lockhart grimaced and waved his arms, causing only a grin from Snape. Well, the potions master knows how to impress the audience. All the students are already burying Lockhart in their thoughts. Well, what's left of him? Deciding that it was enough to clown around, Lockhart got into a pose like a real swordsman with a sword. Snape behaved about the same, only much more laconic. That was the word that came to mind. Notice how the wands are held in this position, Lockhart explained to the quiet room. On the count of 3, spells are cast. There will be no deaths, of course. 1, 2, 3. The wands shot up, but I noticed that Lockhart was not even trying to conjure, but Snape. Expelliarmus. With an overly bright flash of a swift spell beam, Lockhart was thrown against the wall, and he slid down it, sprawling on the stage. The Slytherins, like many other guys, could not help laughing. Even Hermione shook her head dejectedly, covering her face with her hand. He is alive, whispered one of the girls. I hope not. Harry and Ron answered her at the same time. Finally, Lockhart lifted his head off the floor. He looked disheveled and suspiciously happy. Great move, he said, getting up briskly and dusting off his clothes. Professor Snape used the disarm spell, and, as you can see, I lost my weapon. Thank you, Miss Brown. Without a wand, I feel like without hands. Bravo, Professor Snape, bravo. Forgive me, it would be easy to unravel your plan and repel the blow. But it is very useful for students to see. Snape's face grew darker than the cloud, and Lockhart hastened to add. This concludes the demonstration part. Let's go directly to the training session. I'm going to pair you up now. Professor Snape, would you please help me? While the instructors were quick to point out who to stand up against, Hermione and I took positions against each other. Classic stance, I said, and we both copied Snape's stance. Well, she really looked classic. Slygillus erecto, Hermione sent a greenish ray of a curse at me in a bored tone, from which I simply dodged. Bua! I heard from behind, and when I turned around, I saw some Hufflepuff, without much enthusiasm spewing slugs from himself. Oops. I'm sorry, I apologized. Next to him was one of the older students and, nodding in understanding, pointed his wand at the guy, saying, Finita. The guy was released. Don't be distracted, Max, Hermione reminded about herself, sending the Tarantaligra at me. I accepted this curse without any problems with Protego. Then, at a fairly fast pace, but in turn, we threw simple spells and curses at each other, reflecting them on the sides of Protego Reflecto. This brought its own share of chaos, and if the older guys managed somehow, then their peers, and even third-year students, certainly fell under them. They were flying away, laughing, or starting to dance. Chapter 39. Stop. Stop now. Lockhart screamed louder and louder until Snape's crisp and clear voice rang out. Finite incantatem. Snape's voice stopped the general madness. The guys stopped their chaotic casting of spells. Tousled, shabby, distressed, or on the contrary, joyful, the students were in a very different state. Still, the appearance of the majority was far from befitting. Lockhart ran around, helping out due to his modest capabilities, and trying to somehow eliminate the consequences of this chaos. Perhaps, it is better to start with a defense, a bright thought visited our teacher of data. I invite 2 volunteers. Hermione immediately took a step forward. Adventurous, believe in herself? But Lockhart didn't see her. Longbottom, Finch Fletchley, would you like to try? Bad idea, Professor Lockhart, Snape walked over. Longbottom can do such a mess with the simplest spell that Finch Fletchley's remains will have to be carried to the hospital wing in a matchbox. I would suggest Malfoy and Potter, Snape grinned. I looked at the indignant Hermione. The girl clearly decided something for herself, smiled, and went to Potter, deftly pushing him behind her back. You two are constantly in conflict, she explained to Potter with a smile, going up the podium. Miss Granger? Snape did not see all this fuss, but sooner or later, he had to turn around. It seems that you are still Granger, not Potter, and I'm sure that I summoned Potter. Is it important? After all, we are here to study. With a smile, Hermione shrugged her shoulders, and the hall giggled knowingly. This is Granger. Studies. Granger. Books. As you please, Miss Granger, Snape muttered, displeased, but did not interfere. Draco was somehow confused by this situation, but he had already stepped onto the platform. He looked questioningly at Snape, at Lockhart, and at the others, mostly his own. It looks like the beat potty action was being prepared in advance. Hermione, it seems, decided to test herself. It's one thing to use your tricks and practice against a reliable teammate and another thing to use against an unpredictable opponent. Snape nodded to Malfoy and walked over to him, talking quietly. Lockhart went up to Hermione and also tried to say something, but dropped his wand. Hermione waited all this time in a kind of relaxed position, resting her left hand on her side and tapping her shoulder with a wand in her right hand. At the same time, she looked at Malfoy and somehow slyly smiled. I mentally rolled with laughter. Why? I don't know, but it seemed pretty funny to me. I had no doubts about Hermione's safety. Finally, all preparations were over. Draco and Hermione parted to the sides. Malfoy, with a contemptuous face, saluted with his wand. Hermione did the same, but much more relaxed. 3. Lockhart began to count down, 2. Everudstatum, shouted Malfoy ahead of time, sending a thin ray of spell at Hermione. But as she stood in a relaxed position, tapping her wand on the shoulder and smiling, she continued to stand, only slightly shifted to the side. A ray flew past. Oh, she smiled even wider. Didn't your hearing start to deteriorate early? Malfoy's face turned red. Rictum sempra. Slugulus erecto. Stupefy. Malfoy began rather slowly, uncertainly, and angrily cast simple spells on Hermione, but she didn't even put up a shield, just slightly shifted from the line of the spell's flight. Serpensortia. Malfoy shouted, but halfway through, Hermione seemed to have a clue of what was going to happen. We studied this spell. Quite complicated. Ictus. Abruptly, but still with the same smile and almost without changing posture, just pointing her wand at Malfoy, Hermione created a spell that looks like an air fist. A jellyfish-like clot with great speed went to Malfoy. The snake had just fallen from the tip of his wand when it was carried away by Ictus, sending it back to its creator. Well, Malfoy himself was blown away. In flight, with a convulsive, frightened movement of his hand, he threw away a snake that still did not understand anything, and it crashed onto the podium between Hermione and Malfoy. "Oh my!" Hermione rebuked the retreating Draco, whose face clearly showed fear. Spectacled cobra in a training duel? Our Draco learned a complex spell. She spoke in a tone like she was talking to a little child. Snape's 2 eyebrows twitched, and that forced me to mentally roll with laughter even more. And at least Hermione was still relaxed and even to some extent haughtily tapped her wand on the shoulder. "I think I let the genie out of the bottle. I wonder what will come of it." While I was thinking about the strange twists and turns of life, the snake regained consciousness. She was frightened by the crowd and, of course, got into a threatening pose, striving to bite anyone who dared to approach it. Only now did the disciples understand the danger of the situation. Those who stood closer recoiled from the snake in horror. "Stand still, Granger," Snape said gravely. "I will remove it now." And he really would have removed, but Lockhart took the lead. He was already shining like a polished galleon. "No, excuse me, I'll do it. Alaru Descendar." A ray of spell went into the snake with a whistle, but only threw it up and embittered it more. Here Potter could not help but stand out, although both Snape and Hermione were already ready to destroy the snake. The guy hissed, distracting the snake from considering Finch Fletchley for food. The snake reacted instantly to Potter's hiss and glanced at him. While everyone was in total confusion, even Hermione suddenly began to consider Potter as a curious specimen. Snape moved away from the surprise. "Vipera Evanesca." A ray of the spell fell from the professor's wand and landed straight into the snake, which in convulsions began to quickly burn out like a wick, disappearing. The students came to life, whispered, looked at Potter with surprise and condemnation. Ron grabbed his friend by the sleeve of his robe and dragged him out of the large hall, while the students only parted, letting the guy pass by. "Shall we continue?" said Lockhart enthusiastically, but after looking around the still a little shocked and depressed students, even his bright head was able to get the thought that now there was no time for duels. "I think that's enough for today," Snape summed up succinctly. On this, everyone began to disperse. Hermione came down from the podium and walked over to me. Only now, I could see her slightly trembling fingers. "Are you worried, or haven't you fought enough?" "Both," she answered, removing her wand. "We need to talk, urgently. And I guess what?" Percy intercepted us literally at the exit from the Great Hall, and together we reached our class. "I'll be back for you in an hour. Soon we will go to bed." The prefect indicated his position, adjusted the cap on his head, and left. "So." Hermione sat down at her desk and began to broadcast with an important look. "Today, we learned a few important things. Malfoy knows several spells, and Serpensortia is the best of them. In his opinion." Yes, I stared at the girl with feigned adoration. Along the way, I took a notebook and a pen out of my bag and started making short notes. "Clown," smiled Hermione, but immediately turned serious. "Potter Parselmouths." "Okay. No, seriously. I understand that, seriously. You don't think he's related to Slytherin, do you? The probability of this is so small that I don't even know. Slytherin lived 1,000 years ago. It doesn't matter. In England, only one genus was related to him, the Gaunts. This is a well-known fact and is indicated in some old history books. Yes, I remember something like that. As far as I know, the Potters have never crossed paths with the Gaunts. But there is no exact information, and they do not write about this. Even if there is a drop of Slytherin kinship in Potter, it is absurdly small." Hermione's fingers were still twitching. "No," she abruptly got up from the table, taking her wand in her hand. "We need to train more. We spent about 30 minutes in a non-stop duel and only then asked Timmy to bring some juice. Christmas is coming soon." "Exactly." I could hardly resist not hitting my forehead with my palm. "I have to leave for Christmas. Then I'll go too. Almost everyone will disperse, and it will be extremely unsafe for one to stay here." "You're right." Having spent the remaining time before lights out on homework, we did not notice how it was time to go into the living room. Percy came for us. And in the living room, no one congratulated Hermione with an amazing duel. Everybody was talking about Harry, about Parseltongue, about the likelihood that he is the heir. Well, a couple more people were looking at us when we took our place on the sofa in a dark corner. The next day, I quickly made a request to return home for Christmas, and literally in the middle of the day, the whole of Hogwarts was seized by an even greater panic than before. Justin Finch-Fletchley and nearly headless Nick were attacked. For me, the time remaining before the holiday was spent in study and training, and for the rest in fear and looking back. All tickets for the Hogwarts Express were bought up, distributed, and otherwise obtained into the frightened students' hands. An escape was being prepared. Chapter 40. The snow-covered platform of Hogsmeade was literally bursting with the number of students who wanted to leave Hogwarts for Christmas this year. This is logical and predictable. I rode in the compartment with Hermione. Lavender Brown and one of the Patil sisters tried to join our company. I'm an asshole, because I can't even remember the girl's name, but sometimes it seems to me that they change places according to their mood. They tried to talk to us somehow, fish out some rumors, information about where Hermione learned magic to such a level. But everything, even an attempt to make some social activities, came across an absolutely sincere lack of interest on the part of Hermione and my soft smile. We just listened to them. They didn't tell anything new anyway. It looks like the barter principle works here, your rumors for our rumors. In general, they left with nothing, and we continued reading books. Hermione went deep into 2 different bestiaries, and I found myself interested in numerology for the senior years. It is good that we agreed with Madame Pants to take away some books. They were in many copies. In a regular library. Now you need to look both ways, I began a conversation. I know. You showed yourself pretty brightly then, defeating Malfoy. I know. There was no need to show off so much. Well, at least you could try to pretend it's hard for you. What do you want to hear? She gave me a neutral look. That you promise to be careful. When I'm home on vacation, the girl smiled. Everywhere. You say that once a day since that time. And we go everywhere together. And I will continue to say it. Anything can be expected from proud and arrogant kids. Okay. I will be extremely careful. Hermione rolled her eyes towards the ceiling and returned to reading. Well, that's great. In London, the girl was already met by her parents, with whom I greeted and wished them happy holidays. John also appeared in his BMW, he joined in the congratulations, and we all departed in different directions. You didn't just come back on vacation, did you? John asked me as we drove away from the station. Yes. Take me here. From the back seat, I handed him a piece of paper with an address. If everything goes well, I will spend most of my vacation there. And if it's bad? He frowned, taking the sheet and looking at me in the rearview mirror. I don't know. I'll come home. What else could it be? Will you take your things with you? Just a bag. And we haven't celebrated Christmas for a long time. I'll come to the holiday anyway. At these words, John smiled happily, and I noticed that his gray hair began to show through. Yes, old age is not a joy. What's new at school? Oh, you have no idea. I briefly described the situation, talked about Lockhart, his books, slovenliness, and unprofessionalism, greatly downplayed the basilisk's danger, and so on. In half an hour, we got to the right address. Well, if nothing comes of it, I'll be back home today. Anyway, send the pirate back in 3 hours. Okay. Be careful. I got out of the car, wrapped myself more comfortably in my winter coat, pulled up my scarf and hat, threw my bag over my shoulder, and began to look around. John had already driven away, and I was still looking at the identical windows with white frames and red brick walls. The 11th house is here, the 13th too, but the 12th is not visible. What should I do? Creature. Nothing, I looked around. There are at minimum people, it's night, even the lights around are kind of gloomy. Worthless creature. I said louder. You haven't received a cruciatus for a long time? Silence. Suddenly for myself, I realized that I was losing patience, along with stupid hopes. What does a wizard need? A voice sounded nearby, but no one appeared, a creaky old voice. I need to go to the home of the oldest and noblest black family. What does the young wizard have to do with? Are you blind? I turned my head towards the sound. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Old creature will escort the young wizard into the house. Immediately after that, someone took my hand. The world turned upside down for a moment, and now I am already standing in a dark, gloomy corridor. No less gloomy and dark wallpaper with monograms faded, covered with dust, and moved away from the walls in some places. The magical lamps on the walls near the ceiling were dim and covered with spider webs. On either side of me were shelves for shoes, hangers for clothes, and a little further away an oddly shaped umbrella stand. Whom did you bring there, you worthless little house elf? There was a sharp female shout from somewhere in the depths of the house. So this is what you are, the house on 12, Grimmauld Place. Chapter 41. Creature, an old hunched house elf with drooping ears and a nose hooked to the bottom, modestly but persistently pushed me forward along the corridor, complaining about the stupidity of wizards. But that didn't bother me. A strange, pleasant feeling almost imperceptibly spread all over my body. I slowly walked forward, running my fingertips along the slightly rough surface of the old wallpaper, leaving traces on a thin old layer of dust that had thoroughly stuck into the texture. It's funny, but before I have not experienced something like this. How to describe these sensations, it never occurred to me. There are simply no such words. As if you suddenly rushed down on a swing. This feeling was not so bright at all but exciting. I immediately remembered Narcissa. Why? It seems that I felt something like that when she nursed me. What a pity that I don't have memories of that time for even a couple of minutes. A striking lack of upbringing, the portrait of a stately brunette with hair gathered at the back of her head was feeling angry. Arrogant and irritable, it was she who brought me out of the meditative state. Oh, what an honor, the lady in the portrait continued to get excited. You deigned to draw attention to me, young man? Did the Malfoy family decide to give a damn about upbringing? What a disgrace. The lady in the portrait threw up her hands in clearly feigned horror. By the will of Lucius, I have nothing to do with the Malfoy family. The lady in the portrait literally choked on the prepared phrase. She stared at me with not aristocratic wide eyes in surprise. What nonsense, I beg your pardon, you say, young man? Despite the indignant tone of the question, I was in no hurry to answer. I was much more worried about that strange feeling. After listening to myself a little more, I finally found the most appropriate comparison, as if the house vibrates imperceptibly, and this vibration finds response and resonance in me. Young man? I asked a question. The tension that was carefully hidden from me, which I realized only now, finally broke through. It was only necessary to relax for a little and feel this strange sensation from home. The tension from the ritual and exile from the family, from the loss of a similar feeling in childhood. This eternal, incomprehensible magic, spells. Subconscious expectation of trouble, attack, death in the end. This damned Lucius, looming on the horizon, which is why I even study only combat, only out of the corner of my eye remembering and working out a little household and other enchantments. All this, as it turned out, had been accumulating for quite a long time, and there was no one to share with. And now, here is a portrait of a woman I don't know in a beautiful black dress, in such a familiar home. She with such ease started to ask such questions. It was as if the air was released from me, and I simply sat down on the chair that appeared behind my back, unbuttoned my coat, and loosened my scarf. I slowly began to tell my story in this world. Why? Because I simply don't know what to do. What to do? Even a simple solution to kill Lucius is extremely difficult to implement, and the consequences are unknown. Of course, I did not tell her some of the nuances that no one should know about, such nuances as the spirit weapon or hemomancy, rebirth, and more. After speaking out, I continued to sit on a chair opposite the portrait of a stately lady, and my soul was easy and calm. I spoke out. It helped me a lot and really became somewhat easier. And what do you want? What did you come here for? The lady asked. How should I address you? An amazingly timely question, she grinned but didn't swear. Walburga Black. Maximilian Knight. I will repeat the question. What do you want? I don't know, I breathed. Do you believe me? Not really, Walburga grimaced almost imperceptibly. If what you said is true, then you should have died before 11. Huh? I stared at the portrait with incomprehension. What do you mean? Burning the legacy is a far from light ritual. At that word, she grimaced even more. Nobody survived after this, especially the squibs. So maybe I wasn't a squib? Don't talk nonsense, young man. Walburga sternly shouted from the portrait, so much so that creature, who had been expecting something all this time, jumped on the spot, looking reverently at the hostess. Even I, far from magical medicine, know several spells with which you can test a child. I strongly doubt the Malfoy medic's wizards no less. And what about Malfoy himself? For you, young man, Lord Malfoy, she shouted. Such bad manners. Ha, Lord. He's just a piece of shit. I could not resist. Do not swear in front of me, exclaimed Walburga, angrily flashing eyes from the portrait. And even be so, it's none of your business. As you may have guessed, young man, from that day on, Malfoy's problems are Malfoy's problems. I understood. So why did I have to die? Obviously. You forcibly lost half of your magic, half of your essence. This is a sentence. Such a ritual can only be performed with a child, dooming him to a terrible and painful death. TSK. I involuntarily clenched my fist and snapped my knuckles a couple of times. But I survived. And this is strange. Perhaps something or someone influenced it? Creature. An old house elf literally flew up to the portrait in his shabby, dirty pillowcase. Creature is here, dear lady. Look at this young man and tell me what you feel. Creature turned to me and began to peer at me attentively. The silence lasted for at least a minute, and then he turned back to the portrait of Walburga. He's very similar to Mrs. Narcissa. I already knew that, but I bet Creature meant something else. How much? Answer me. The little house elf stumbled on the spot, bowing his head apologetically. Very similar. Only a little different. Just a little bit. Seeing the discontent on Walburga's face, Creature sank even more. Walburga looked at me. And you, young man, what do you feel in this house? It's hard to say, I thought. Something native, as then, in infancy. Amazing. Walburga threw up her hands. You're the wizard, after all, survived somehow, studying at Hogwarts. The witch depicted in the portrait fussed, walking along the canvas from edge to edge. She kept walking and walking, muttering something under her breath. So, what should I do? Huh? Walburga stopped on the portrait, looking at me. In a new way, or something. What do you want? So that the shadow of Malfoy does not loom over me, every now and then threatens to kill. So kill him, Walburga shrugged, lost in thought. I didn't even know what to say. I was expecting something more. Not so radical. Walburga abruptly stopped near the chair in her portrait, sat down, and simply lit a cigarette. And what then? You, a young man, grew up among Muggles? Yes. Oh, let the old lady guess, not a smile appeared on her face, but the grin of a predator sensing prey. You thought that when you came here, I, or someone else, would gladly open their arms to you, teach you. How do the Muggleborns say? I will teach ancestral magic, throw a couple of virgins on the altar, which is right behind the freezer. Something like that? Oh, yes, you still need to go to the little green ones, shed a couple of buckets of your blood, and learn a lot about yourself. Then hang on yourself a couple of titles, ancestral artifacts, rings, and other things, become a lord, and no one will touch you. How much muggle-blooded nonsense I've heard in my time. Chapter 42. I sat and listened to this speech with my mouth open. By the look on your face, you thought so. No, no. I shook my head. Well, or something similar. Walburga dragged on her cigarette a couple of times and, dropping the ashes, released non-aristocratic rings of smoke. Oh, how I love to break these crazy ideas about the world. Let's start in order? Sitting more comfortably in my chair, I prepared to listen carefully. This might be interesting. To begin with, I want to upset you. No one is waiting for you here. You were not named by your mother. In infancy, you were not dedicated to the family tapestry. For the house, despite the positive reaction from home, you simply do not exist. This can be fixed, but is it necessary? You have been named Maximilian Knight for at least 11 years now, and the name is not an empty phrase. It literally grows together with the soul and body, and even if you are clearly black by blood and magic, but after all, even the letter came from Hogwarts to what name? Knight. Exactly. It's not easy to change. This is a very complex process, back to lordships and stuff. The lord is just a status, a beautiful tablet. It won't make you stronger or smarter. But it will oblige to attend the meetings of the Wisengamot and participate in the rest of society. And most important to you, it won't give you any protection against Malfoy. What prevents one lord from killing another? Nothing. Further, there are no miraculous artifacts and other things. Moreover, the goblins have nothing but money and possibly a couple of dozen not-so-important trinkets. Who would trust them with something like that, given the history? The ring of the head does exist, but no one knows where it is. How so? How? The lousy blood trader, Sirius, just threw it out somewhere. A piece of bald. For at least a minute, Walburga went broke, scolding Sirius. I raised my hand like an excellent student in the class. Walburga noticed this, grunted, and nodded her head, giving her permission to ask. So my name is not on the tapestry? Naming and initiation are not carried out in isolation from each other. According to you, it turns out that you were not given a name, which means that you are not on the Malfoy tapestry either. And even if you were there, Lucius probably would have removed you from it. Lady Walburga, but... In theory, if I get on the tapestry, would my name appear on the Malfoy tapestry? Still, Narcissa née Black and Lestrange, and many other families. By the eyes of Walburga, I realized that I had said something stupid. And where are such foolish thoughts in the minds of Muggle-borns came from? Make up all sorts of nonsense. There are no family tapestries associated with the tapestry of another house. Hopefully, there is no need to explain why. Looks like I need to. Walburga again paid a little attention to the smoldering but not decaying cigarette, and only then she spoke. First and foremost, a wizard is not a friend or brother to another wizard. We do not consider individual cases, only the general picture. We have very few material values, but what we have are true relics. The greatest value is information and knowledge. Each house is trying to get the benefits of another, and this is how it happened many hundreds of years ago. It is still relevant now. Imagine that on the tapestry of the once related houses, but now warring, there is information about children born, marriages, lines of inheritance, and so on. It is unacceptable. Our ancestors, who created tapestries, also understood this. They are not related to each other in any way, and the information itself does not appear on them. You said that the most important thing is knowledge and information. But what about the purity of blood? The purity of blood is generally out of the categories of importance. And it is not discussed. If it is not discussed, then it is not discussed. I will be able to think it over myself somehow. But still. Lady Walburga, what should I do? I already said, young man. Did you not listen to me? She asked, a little annoyed, casually placing the mouthpiece with a cigarette on a tray on the coffee table. You need to strike first. But what about Narcissa? She is no longer a little girl. She will somehow figure it out. They have a son, Draco Malfoy. He'll probably guess that I will kill his father. Another enemy. Kill him too then, but not before he gets an heir. Such an old house should not be interrupted because of the stupidity of one of its members. For several more hours, we talked with Walburga about various issues. As before, I don't want to become any lord and so on, which I did not fail to report. Walburga, on the other hand, operated on such concepts as the memory of ancestors and so on. It's just immoral, so take and ruin hundreds of years of labor of many generations of wizards, ruin their heritage, influence, and much more. To ruin everything that they got by hard work, sweat, and blood. In the end, we came to the conclusion that I should try to find the black ring. Without it, all other controversies are meaningless. The house accepted me as one of the blacks, so I can come here, although I do not have access to many things simply because of the lack of a ring. Along the way, it became clear what role the house plays in everything. It turned out to be pretty simple. Many generations of blacks lived here, conjured, created their spells, hung various protections, and other tricks. Over time, any such dwelling turns into a kind of artifact, in which all these spells, children's outbursts of magic, and other witchcraft merge into something single, monumental. Now, being able to compare, I can confidently say that there is something similar at Hogwarts, but much more impersonal, or something. This can be compared to different air when you come from the city to nature. Only if there really is different air, then in Hogwarts, it is something intangible. In the Black's house, this feeling is very tangible, even if it is extremely difficult to interpret this feeling. In general, I still couldn't draw any definite conclusions in relation to inheritance. On the other hand, it turned out that no such ancestral magic exists. There are the knowledge and experience of ancestors recorded in books, scrolls, and folios, there is a heritage artifacts and so on. And there is a long history of house, with its own set of internal rules and so on. I did not raise any other topics. Walburga told Creature to feed me and give me a room. Creature was unhappy with having to serve the strange relatives of the great lady. However, overall, he showed quite an obvious sanity. As well as the portrait of Walburga. It even seems to me that she prepared her inadequacy purely for one individual and his guest friends. Chapter 43. When I woke up, I stared in confusion at the unfamiliar ceiling. A few seconds, and a picture of yesterday formed in my head. I'm in a house on Grimmauld. Throwing off the covers, and sitting on the bed, I began to look around. A simple, uncomplicated light room. Large and comfortable single bed made of dark carved wood. A large wardrobe, bedside tables, a chest, a large work table to match the bed, a window covered with thick light curtains, through which the rays of the dawn sun shone. Which means it's already 10 o'clock. I slept well. My bag lay on a chair by the table, apparently cleaned things neatly stacked on the nightstand. After changing my clothes, I was about to search for a bathroom, but Creature appeared with a pop. Guest of the house Black, without enthusiasm, the house elf indicated a nod of his head. Creature, I nodded back. Breakfast is ready. Where can I find a bathroom here? Follow me. Creature left the room, and I followed. Striking differences, the corridor was gloomy and dark, dusty, and in general, the atmosphere here was similar to an abandoned house. Creature walked me to one of the doors and pointed at it. There was a perfectly normal bathroom inside, the sink, albeit old-fashioned, not the best yellow lighting on the ceiling, a mirror with a locker above the sink. Further, one could see another door, the inner one. I bet this is where the bathtub is. Quite ordinary and familiar taps with valves protruded from the sink, turning which, I achieved a snort, but the water poured out, and it was clean enough for me. After washing and putting myself in decent look, I left the room and went downstairs. Going down 3 floors and finding myself in a corridor already familiar to me, I, not paying attention to the heads of house elves on the stakes near the stairs, went to the kitchen by smell. It's large, comfortable, and spacious, with bulky but beautiful dark furniture, a long and massive wooden table, and slightly pretentious wooden chairs all around. Opposite one of these chairs, Creature, without any respect, placed a plate of scrambled eggs, bacon, and bean stews. There was a lonely twisted bun on another plate, and right now, Creature was pouring a cup of coffee. Thanking the house elf, I had a quick bite. As soon as I put an empty cup of coffee on the saucer, Creature appeared. Mrs. Walburga wishes to speak with a strange guest of the House of Black. In response, I just nodded and headed into the corridor, where on the wall was a firmly glued portrait of Lady Black so that she could see everything that was happening around her. "Good morning, Lady Walburga," I nodded and sat down in the chair opposite the portrait. "Good, Maximilian," the witch nodded to me from the portrait, sitting on her chair and smoking a cigarette. "What did you think about our conversation yesterday?" "I do not know." "Why are you repeating, 'I don't know, I don't know'? What a stupid piece of the Black's blood. This must be all Muggle upbringing. Obviously, she wants to provoke me, but for what? Too obvious provocation, Lady Walburga." She looked at me carefully and nodded. "Cold-blooded and sensible, like a mother. Anything better than a stupid, hot-tempered blood traitor. Find the ring. Even if you do not want to become the head of the family, which makes me very sad, then at least find a ring. There is simply no one else to do it. You can stay in the house. Creature will give access to the tutorial section of the library." "Tutorial?" I asked in surprise. "Did you think that you would immediately learn dark magic, as required by the traditions of the house? For the house, you are now just a stranger, albeit relative. Well, even if you were from birth in house, you will not see dark magic until you are 15 anyway. I've heard rumors that the Blacks are almost forcibly forced to learn dark magic from an early age. It is said that for this very reason, Sirius. Don't remind me this vile traitor." Walburga flared up, jumping up from the painted chair. "I do not want to hear the name of someone who, in the most difficult times, hypocritically and selfishly spat and turned away from the whole family, from ancestors and heritage. Trampled and thrown away like an old rag. He was supposed to be the next head. He was the heir. No one forced him to use dark magic, but he was obliged to know." Walburga calmed down for a few minutes, and only after regaining her peace of mind, sitting down on a chair and taking a couple of puffs, she spoke again. "You probably noticed that all the ancient houses have rather speaking surnames. Some are in Old English, and you just can't understand them. Some have roots in other languages. But this is not important. A long time ago, when there was no statute of secrecy and wizards lived side by side with Muggles. Life was not sugar. Wars, epidemics, uprisings, invasions of all sorts of barbarians. Muggles gnawed Muggles' throats, wizards gnawed wizards. Some of the wizards served the crown, strengthening their positions, gaining power and influence, someone to petty feudal lords, and someone himself was this feudal lord. One fine day, several loyal friends and comrades who have gone through more than one or two magical battles, decided to found their own house. Then it was just a group of strong combat wizards, and the concept of dark magic had a completely different framework. They were called Blackmare, after. Walburga chuckled, clearly remembering something. After the lake. As time went on, children were born in the house. Then, none of them were still related to each other, so they got married, finally creating the house. But they did not stop doing their usual thing, war. The people then were simple and stupid. Therefore, they called the members of the house only according to the first part, black. The reason for this was the absolute ruthlessness and cruelty to the enemies, and the means were not chosen. So people called them black. Since then, and it was 1,200 or so years ago, house was called black, and the reputation was maintained in a simple way: ruthlessness to enemies and dark magic for all occasions. It turns out that dark magic has become dark simply under the influence of fears and opinions of people? Exactly. Fear, envy, hatred. Evil wizards are strong, evil wizards are terrible, evil wizards spare no one. Evil wizards must be beaten with sticks and burned at stake. And it doesn't matter that evil wizards have fought more than once or twice for their native lands and for dirty idiots. This is not easy to explain in a nutshell, but since then, the surname Black has become synonymous with dark magic, fear, death, and more. Many families turned their backs on us, betrayed us, declared war. The rootless did not understand and did not accept. Rare allies appeared from time to time, but much more traitors, who were afraid of public opinion. They were afraid to preserve their history, customs, and traditions. This is the origin of the house's traditions, to know no less than ancestors, to improve in magic, dark, light, pink, it doesn't matter. Over time, this evolved into marriages with equally gifted families, endowed with both knowledge, morality, and traditions. With those who value the past and their heritage. With those who are not afraid of condemnation or censure from the ignorant filthy garbage, of which the majority is around. In order to carry and increase the heritage through the centuries, not to lose and not dilute with fictional pseudo-morality and far-fetched principles. In order not to succumb to the pernicious influence of Muggles' ideas about some kind of light, love, and forgiveness. This is the purity of blood. This is the preservation and enhancement of heritage, without dividing it into allowed and forbidden. The purity of blood cannot be taken literally. This is much more than just a pedigree. Those who have no ancestors, did not hold ancient books in their hands, did not feel the magic of dozens of generations, their aspirations, hopes, pain, and disappointments, will never understand, appreciate, and accept this gift. There is no greater betrayal than to give a damn and throw away your kinship, family, all this. Even Muggles will not stoop to desecrating graves, although they have nothing close to such a kinship. Always pure, huh? Always pure. Chapter 44. Large flakes of white snow fell slowly from the sky, swaying under the lantern's yellow light. I spent 2 days visiting Grimmauld, and now, on this pleasant winter evening, I'm going to go home, Christmas, whatever one may say. Grimmauld Place is not particularly crowded. And now people can be seen mainly only in the windows of houses. In these windows, sometimes decorated with colored lights of garlands, happy and not very joyful people were seen. Someone was still decorating the home, somewhere a young couple was dancing in dim, soft light. And someone met a crowd of guests that a minute ago, with noise and laughter, disappeared into the entrance of an apartment building. I stopped and looked around, looking for John's car. It seems he hasn't arrived yet. Maybe that one. No, it's not even a BMW. By the way, speaking of BMW, perhaps I should get myself one car? No, I'll buy it later. One time I liked the 90s models, but by the time when in my past life I could afford to buy a car, a 90s car in good condition had become a myth, and bringing it into good condition was insane. With these thoughts, I decided to take a walk, but at this moment, the pirate flew up to me. Oh ho ho! He hooted in his strange manner and landed on his outstretched hand. Squinting one eye, this strange representative of owls stared at me with the second, and the feathers on his head, as always, were in a creative mess. With a sharp movement of his paw, he literally poked me in the face with a small message, which I immediately took. John wrote that he would be a little late. Their eldest son arrived and asked to pick him up from the airport. In his slovenliness, he seems to have forgotten his wallet. Taking a pen out of my bag, I scribbled on the back of a note that I would get there myself and handed the note to the pirate. He snorted in displeasure, shook off the snowflakes that had settled on him, and went flying. Funny birds. Grimmauld Square is not in the best area of London. Typical multi-story houses, not the most well-groomed, but also not neglected. They look pretty decent by Christmas, and only house number 12, which I can see now, looks somewhat abandoned. I went to more decent places closer to the center, although, for Great Britain's capital, the concept of center is rather loose. Every now and then, I met people wrapped in winter coats and jackets. Someone was in a hurry, so much so that the creak of snow under their feet did not stop for a second, and someone was walking regularly with friends or comrades. But I've always liked being alone. Pretty soon, I didn't notice how I ended up on the brightly lit streets, where the facades of houses and shopping centers shone brightly with New Year's decorations. There were even more people around, their clothes were brighter, and the mood was festive. Another hour or two, and many of these people will go home to celebrate Christmas with their families. I need to hurry too. Buses don't run anymore, there are only taxis. But I'll take a walk again. I walked and thought about what I had heard in the last 2 days at the house on Grimald. The information was helpful, but there were some issues with little controversy. Why did I have to die after Malfoy's rituals? Do many generations of wizards give something in the lineage, or not? It is unlikely that Walburga will lie about this, but she can just keep back some information. In general, this whole conversation should, in theory, awaken in me a certain pride and a sense of responsibility. Considering my age and the fact that I haven't seen real dark magic and don't know it, then, let's just say, if I were really 12, I would be proud that I am black, and to become black, even more, I would already headlong rush to look for the ring, preserve the legacy, and so on. This does not mean that I will not search, no. I will, but without fanaticism. I strongly doubt that the Black Library can provide me with anything more brutal than my knowledge from that damned French grimoire with a demon. On the other hand, it may contain knowledge that will fill the gap between the Hogwarts library and my knowledge. And then, if we compare, it turns out that I know the structure of a nuclear reactor and can build it, but to move away from the scheme, make changes or improvements, no, I can't, because I don't even know mathematics. This is, of course, only a comparison, but quite accurate. In general, if everything is extremely simplified, then the task of the Lord is to improve the well-being of the house, expand the library, develop as a wizard, kill the unwanted and continue the family. In any case, I was going to do something like that, so there is nothing bad about it, and to be afraid of difficulties is somehow frivolous or something. On the other hand, my becoming a lord may be subject to various restrictions, which I really do not know anything about. On my next visit, it is worth discussing this in more detail with Lady Walburga. Waking up from my thoughts and looking around, I could not help but notice a rather drastic change in the atmosphere. Nothing magical. I just walked into some remote area myself and did not even notice. A straight street with narrow gateways between 4 5-story houses, there is no light in the windows, street lights work in one, and thick flakes of snow still falling from the sky covered everything around here, from benches to parked cars. Just in case, having checked the wand in the holster on the forearm, I threw the bag strap more comfortably and walked on. Suddenly a man in tattered and old clothes ran out of the doorway. Steam poured from his mouth. He looked around in a hurry and, noticing me, suddenly disappeared. Apparition? There was a clap behind my back, and immediately a wand was put to my neck, and the man's hand grabbed me by the lapel of my clothes. Looks like I relaxed too much. And why do I need a wand? Wizardry will be spotted. You'll be a hostage, the man hissed, and 3 spells without a wand have already surfaced in my head. It is at such moments that you understand the full value of that strange grimoire, that magic is simply outrageous, although there is a sea of little things. I grabbed his hand, touching the skin, and focused on the desired image, mentally imagining a simple geometric figure of lines on my hand. Lislin, the first word. What? The man wanted to continue, but... News. On the second word, I clearly imagined how magic ran through an imaginary geometric figure. It doesn't matter how you imagine magic, in this spell, you just need to consciously launch some stream along the lines, which is associated with magic. A sharp wave of heat and steam parted away from the man, enveloping us in a thick, impenetrable fog. Even the snow melted under my feet. With my hand, I clearly felt the ice surface. Unscrewing from the grip and quickly turning around, I pushed the figure of this homeless-looking wizard with my hand. There was a frozen grimace of amazement on his face. So he fell, breaking into small fragments of the color of internal organs. Chapter 45. Having looked at what was left of the man, I was about to leave, when suddenly, "He is here!" There was a shout from somewhere from the side of the alley, and Stupefy flew right after that. It was not a phrase that flashed through my head for a brief moment, but the image that the torso was the best target. I sat down abruptly, and above my head, 3 beams left swirls in a cloud of steam. Almost immediately after, a gust of wind blew away the cloud completely, and in the dim light of the rare street lamps, I saw 3 people. A lame, plump man in a coat and with a staff in his hand, and 2 younger ones, in robes with red elements. It seems like a girl and a guy. Gotcha, exclaimed the guy, but kept pointing his wand at me. Boobies, loudly and sharply shouted a man in a coat, hitting the ground with his staff. From the staff, a translucent wave of magic rushed sharply and quickly towards me. I had to jump no less sharply to the side, literally 1.5 meters, behind the stone masonry of the railing of the small staircase of the entrance. The wave passed over me, crushing bricks a little and throwing up flakes of snow. Grab him first, and only then relax, the man barked, brushing aside all the guesses about his identity. I couldn't get in touch with this idiot at all, so I took off my already familiar, passive hemomancy limiter. Immediately I felt a surge of strength and vivacity. You, from there, you there. Moody gave out valuable instructions. Oriented from memory, I jerked sharply in the opposite direction from the wizards. So hard that the air hit me in the face, like a sledgehammer. He's leaving, there was a shout and several claps of apparitions. By running my hand over my face, I created impenetrable darkness in the place of the face. As then, in loot. Ahead of me, about 50 meters away, one of the wizards appeared and pointed his wand, an unknown spell. A short step to the side, the spell will pass by. A little further away from the first, the girl in robe appeared and burst into a series of stopping spells. Stupefy, reducto into the ground in front of me, one more stupefy. I dodged it all. Reducto raised the asphalt crumb, but I just threw it aside with a semblance of telekinesis. It was not in vain that I trained even before Hogwarts. There was a meter left to a narrow lane, I ran and turned. Moody's figure in a dark alley is not what you want to see. He raised his staff very low with one hand and was already preparing to hit it on the asphalt. Without thinking, I directed the magic into my hands and clapped my hands. Wag lift, I breathed out at the same time as the blow of Moody's staff. Two waves, so similar to shock waves, met and parted to the sides, immediately knocking out clouds of brick chips from the house's walls. Moody created a dense and clear sphere of protego around him without any movement, protecting himself from the brick shrapnel. I ran up the wall, by inertia. Strengthening from hemomancy does its job. Moody looked at me with obvious interest, but did nothing more. Without stopping, I pushed forward as much as possible, flying over the dome of protection, and Moody again raised his staff. Wag lift, I clapped my hands again, and once again, the two waves parted to the side. But Moody's spell was twice as strong as the last, so I was picked up and carried further down the alley. This did not bother me at all, because the direction I needed was sustained. Slightly tumbling in the air, I raised my palm to the mouth as if I wanted to blow something off it, mentally forming on it one of the simple spells of misty haze from the grimoire. Fumgilt, I breathed out a thick purple fog that instantly filled the alley. After that, I landed and ran with a jerk from a possible chase. I ran and listened, but there was no chase. Now it's definitely time to go home. Pull yourself together. In the dark alley, there was a loud cry of Moody, followed by a biting click of a slap. The cadet said in a painfully exhausted voice. Attention! Snapped Moody. The cadet, who did not come to his senses, tried to stand up, but he was led, and he crashed into the snow. The cadet's gaze swam anywhere, with each eye in its own direction. Turkey. The cadet mumbled, dropping saliva from the mouth. Disgusting, Moody grimaced, and numerous scars on his old face completed the picture. Tonks. Here, visibly staggering, now and then restoring balance with awkward waves of hands, a girl with pale purple hair approached Moody. Her gaze was slightly defocused and looked as if behind the old aura. But at least she was on her feet. Congratulations. You're defeated by the kid. What did I say? Constant vigilance. Yes, constant vigilance. The girl straightened up, starting to fall on her back. An absurd wave of her arms, one foot slipped, and now the girl had already fallen on her back, absurdly throwing her legs up to the sky. Merlin Almighty! Groaned Moody, and left the alley. Limping and tapping with his staff, he approached the ice shards scattered along the street. Judging by their appearance, they were once not the most successful smugglers. Today, luck has completely turned away from him. The old oar's artificial eye swirled wildly in its socket, and he himself only chuckled. Without any dark magic. Here is an outburst. There are a rather interesting magical structure and a haze, wandless. Impressive. Instructor Moody, sir. The staggering girl returned to her upright position and, approaching, stood at the side of the old wizard. Why don't you pursue the criminal? Open your eyes, Cadet Tonks. Eh? Here's our criminal. Moody swept his staff around the scattered pieces of ice of different sizes. The girl concentrated her attention with all her might and peered intently for several seconds. Not without difficulty, but in pieces of ice, it was possible to recognize parts of internal organs, clothes, pieces of limbs, bones. Moody looked with an undisguised smile at the cadet, who had literally turned green with awareness. The girl fussed, trying to check if she had stepped on something, but again slipped and fell. A completely insignificant piece of ice hit her hand, and then she simply vomited. Rookies, grinned Moody, looking around the neighborhood. Here and there, curious people appeared from the windows, although the street seemed completely deserted. Call the Obliviators, Cadet. Boo-ah, yes, sir.
That is all for today. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. If you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please drop a comment down below.